NoVA UX meetup or hashtag NoVA UX. And the sponsors for tonight are GoCanvas. They have they sponsored the space, the pizza, and the beer. So super thanks to you guys for that. Cool. So we have a, let's see, I'm trying to remember, what's our November, but and then another event in December for C. And let's see, so some questions. So how many people here are new? Awesome. Thank you guys for coming out for the first time. How many, who here is hired? Oh, wow, that's a lot. Okay, so your hands up, or I'll just point to you. So let's see, what are you hiring for, and what's,
all right. Yeah, we're at GoCanvas. I'll tell a little bit more about it, but we're hiring for 2 senior UX designers right now.
Cool. All right. Yeah.
Preston, I work for a company called L2T, security software. Have stuff.
My name is David. I'm a product manager at First Healthcare IT company. I'm hiring pretty much everything that designers and
my name is Janella. I work for the Federal Election Commission. I'm hiring a Python developer. So not UX, but really.
So, like to have somebody from GoCanvas talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, you know, I've got it embedded in the presentation a little bit. You guys will hear too much about it anyway, so that's all right.
All right,
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome, great. Well, thanks. Big round of applause for NoVA UX for hosting this. And disregard everybody else who's hiring. It's just us. All right. So tonight's talk, what I thought I'd do is I walk through kind of like an intro and give a little bit of background on myself and the company. We'll talk about why the PM and UX partnership matters, I think, as much as it does. As I walk through my background, you're kind of hear some of the things that I've done previously. So I've had a lot of exposure, unfortunately, to how companies go about getting this stuff wrong. We'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about the kind of things that I've seen that make companies get it right. And then what I wanted to do, and one of the things that was in the abstract, a lot of people had talked to me while we were sort of like networking ahead of time, and they had said that they were really interested in the topic because they wanted to see real life examples of things that were kind of like being done at existing companies, right? So what I wanted to do was like at some point jump out of PowerPoint as well and actually show you like real life documents that are actually being used inside of a company to drive decisions that actually go towards the things that we're talking about. So I'll kind of jump back and forth between PowerPoint and some like real life kind of like scenarios. And then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. I actually don't know how long the talk's going to go. This is the first time that I've given this one. And so we'll just kind of like jump in, but we can go as late as we need to. So if you guys have questions, don't hesitate to stop me and touch me. Real quick on my background, my career started. Is anybody familiar with Webvan? Raise your hand if you've heard of Webvan. Wow. Did nobody go to business school here? All right. So Webvan is the greatest .com disaster story of all time. And that's where I started. So we went through $1 billion market cap and $300 million in the bank in 10 months. Right? Awesome. That was a great way to start my career. So I was a Silicon Valley guy. I graduated from Berkeley. It was 1997. I got caught up in the whole thing, and then boom, I was out of a job just like that. Thankfully, I was picked up by this guy by the name of Marty Kagan, who is sort of like a guru within the product management world over at eBay. I was the 12th product manager to join eBay, and when I left, I was one of 120 product managers there. So quite the scaling activity, but it was a big success. I moved out to the East Coast from the West Coast to take a role to run product and UX at Opower. I had done some other kind of stints in between that I'll kind of skip over because they're all failures like that. But Opower was a good success story. Based in Arlington, it went public about 4 years ago. I was there for about 4 years. We joined when the company was about 40 people. I left when the company was 650 people. We took it to $1 billion valuation IPO, which was great. And that led to me deciding to do some advisory type work with a bunch of different kind of startup companies. Opower had come from the startup that I had joined into kind of like a big company, basically. And so while that was great for investors and things like that, for me as an employee, it just wasn't really where I wanted to be anymore. So I departed that, and I kind of started my own advisory practice with just myself. But over a 4-year period, I had a chance to advise 50 companies, which was really kind of like an awesome experience for me. And I was able to kind of put all these data points together and sort of read the patterns a little bit and say, wow, this is the kind of thing that makes companies successful. This is the kind of thing that makes companies not so successful. And so when you start to put enough of those kinds of like data points together, it kind of leads to a presentation much like this one. And it also led to my decision to join GoCanvas, which is one of the companies that I was advising. So while I've been at the company for 7 months, which is not so long, I was actually an advisor to the company for 3 years prior. So I know a lot of executive staff and things like that. And they kind of, we got really excited about where we were going with product vision and product strategy. And so they wanted to pull me on, and it was one of 100 companies that I had been engaged with, where I really thought, wow, we're doing something really special. So I was excited about that. You'll see I'm a big fan of movies. So who cares about this whole PM UX thing, right? Like, why does it matter? Well, there's a number of people who care about it, like everybody, right? And it's not just us that are in this room, right? It's people who are outside of this room as well. So it's like product managers, product designers care about it because we're the ones who are sort of like directly involved together, but also other stakeholders, right? Like we together between product management and UX work with marketing, we work with sales, we work with engineering, and to the extent that our partnership between product management and UX is really strong, we can make sure that the partnership between the kind of combined PM and UX function and the other stakeholders out there is really strong as well. So that's an important one they care about, even if they don't know what it actually entails. Customers certainly care about it, right? Because we've got a disconnect between where you want to take the product from a business standpoint and where you want to take the product from a customer standpoint. Guess who always wins that, right? It's usually the business side that kind of tends to win that internally, and the customers are on the losing end. And guess what? When the customers are on the losing end of that, it's the business is going to suffer as well, right? So it's all about getting this really good kind of strong yin and yang between the two. And ultimately, at the end of the day, because of that, that's why shareholders actually care, right? And again, they may not know that they care, but I guarantee you that they do. How companies go about getting the stuff wrong, right? When they, you ever like heard the research study that kind of led to the founding of like the new Coke brand. It was all about taking like these very small sips and taste tests of the old kind of Coke Classic and the new Coke, and in a small taste, it all tastes so it's any of big failure. So I've seen plenty of cases with the advising work that I've done and things like that where companies have gotten it wrong. But I wasn't actually expected to stand up here and share with you all the examples of local tech companies that have screwed it all. But they probably wouldn't appreciate that very much. But what I will talk about is sort of like the 7 deadly sins, I call it, of product management and user experience, and we'll call it like the non-collaboration between the two. And I, because I'm a big fan of movies, will do this all through the lens of arch villains, telling their narrative from their perspective. So arch nemesis of our heroes. First one, the design will be in accordance with my specifications, right? This is like the ultimate product manager. I think I just did the Myers-Briggs test, and I came out, have you ever done it where it maps to a Star Wars character? I'm this guy, right? I'm Palpatine. All right, but anyway, as product managers, a lot of times we sort of like come to these conclusions of like, here's what I want it to look like. I want it to be like this. I want it to be like that. Just go like make that kind of thing happen, right? And it puts UX in a box, and that box can really be kind of like very constrained, very restrictive, and ultimately hurts the customer. So we've all kind of probably seen some form of this before. All right, this one. How dare you prioritize empathy over my business objectives, right? If you ever have that kind of thing going on, that's usually a product manager out there kind of talking about how, look, we need to get more clicks on this thing. We need to get more, participation from users over here. I want to see these engagement numbers move in this direction because I'm getting a lot of pressure from my boss about it. But the problem is if you take that kind of approach, then the issue is you end up kind of deprioritizing those things that the customer actually cares about. Like those things that you're not empathetic about the customer. And to me, there's an underlying issue here, which is that somehow there's some sort of like dichotomy between those. If you think that it's an either-or decision, you've got something upstream from that that's already wrong. Right? Go figure that out. Connect the dots ahead of time between what's good for the business and what's good for the customer. If you can't make those two things correspond, what are you even in business for in the first place, right? Peter Drucker would say the purpose of business is to treat the customer. It's not about making a profit. That's the part that comes after, right? So you make a profit by treating the customer, which means you get to deliver value. And so I see this happen over and over. I shall approve your design, right? Or no, and you will embrace me as your brother, right? Just like movie. So I see this kind of thing happen a lot within companies as well, where there's like an approval process that designers have to go through. In fact, we've even had this kind of thing historically at GoCanvas. Right? So when I came in, one of the first things I tried to kill was like, look, we're not going to have designers do all their work and then review it with this, but one person at a time. Right? So this is like what the Wicked Witch of the West would say. And in many ways, what I've sort of found is that UX sometimes would get relegated to this role, either by product or by some executive sitting there saying, look, your job is to make things look pretty and easy to use. No, that's not it. And we'll kind of cover what I think it is instead, right? But this often is sort of like the perspective that other people who are outside of the product and UX kind of like circle might think that it's about. And yes, it is true. It is important to build things in such a way that they are pretty and that they are easy to use. But if you think that's the entirety of the function, you've got something very wrong with it. It's kind of like saying that the role of product management is to author requirements. Yeah, at some point you actually have to do that, but that's not the purpose of the role, right? The purpose of the role for product is to make the product successful in the market, period. So what does that look like for you? We're out with this one. Joker's all about these like ridiculous choices. Right? So you get to choose. Do you want to report as UX into product managers or marketing or engineering? It's like, none of the above. Like, how about can I be my own team? And this is something that I see time and time again in situations where there's an organizational structure in place where UX designers are reporting into the product managers that they're working with, and that creates like a company or anything like that, but subordinate in terms of decision making. Like that there's almost like a natural water flow of decisions that take place. There's the decision of what should we work on next, and then after you make that decision, then we need to make things. Once we've decided that we're going to go do that, then we need to make sure that it's actually pretty and easy to use and everything else. But if UX isn't involved in that decision about what you're going to go build in the first place, then you've sort of relegated UX to being an afterthought. And it's not just within the role, or the kind of like role that they play in the company, it's going to be something that's going to be an afterthought in your customers in a sense as well. And that's no reason. So this is one that I always undo the very first thing I see. Trash it. calm down. The best thing we can do is go on with our daily routines and actually post a movie. I thought it was extremely pertinent here as well, which is we've always done things this way, right? Here's our process. It just kind of like works, and don't try to rock the boat. Or, you know, we have these brand guidelines, and it dictates everything, right? Or there's this kind of specific doctrine or structure or something like that that has to be followed. And in many ways, the role of UX is to kind of push the envelope. So, like, what we can do to make better design, right? If nobody ever did that, you just wouldn't see product designs advance, right? And if you have this approach, you're always going to be following the leader. You're not going to become the leader yourself. If you want to become the leader yourself, you've got to sort of like abandon this, just like, what's his name? He went through the previous next week. And then this one, my favorite. Right. Like, let's go move forward, okay? Zip it. My best Dr. Evil impression, not very good. But I think this kind of thing actually at the end of the day happens a lot, right? Where the reality is you're working at a startup, you're working at a tech company, things are moving fast, and so you just want to like make these calls. But every hour that you don't spend upstream trying to make the right kind of decision by doing the right user research, et cetera, leads to, I think somebody that just told me this, about 100 hours of somebody else having to unravel those bad decisions that come up, right? So you see this kind of thing happen a lot, and it's what leads to the arch enemy ultimately sticking the bucket, right? If they're too rash. The only thing they're never rash about is like killing the hero. Like, I never figured that out. They fix everything. But anyway, how companies get this right. So I'm a huge IKEA fan. I think they do a lot of things that are really cool. I love the kind of building blocks nature of it. It's kind of the way my mind works. But I see a lot of companies that have done things very well. And what I wanted to do is share with you some of the best practices that I've seen that sort of play against what some of those evil plots are that we've sort of like seen with other companies. So I'll call this part the 10 commandments of PM UX collaboration, right? So we were talking about non-collaboration before. We talked about collaboration here. And there's a few things that I've seen companies do that are really good. And to be totally frank, like what I've basically done, the reason I was excited to come back to GoCanvas was I'd worked with 50 different companies. I'd seen like, you know, little bits here and there, little nuggets, and I thought if we could just assemble all these things into one place, we could do things like incredibly well. So what would that actually look like if we did? And that's one of the reasons I was excited to go back to an operations role. The first of these we talked about already, which was sort of the role of UX. You know, it's not about making it look pretty easy to use. The role of UX is to fill the empty chair. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Jeff Bezos is sort of known for having at Amazon sitting there, and whether it's a boardroom or some other kind of conference room, no matter what kind of meeting is there, that there's like an empty chair that's just sitting there. And it's supposed to represent the customer who's not physically seating in the chair, but should be at this meeting, right? For the decision that we're going to make, that customer should be there. And I sort of see this as actually being the fundamental role of UX. They fill the empty chair. And again, it doesn't matter what meeting it is. Not for a design decision, for every decision, right? The customer should be represented. And that's the role of UX. And if you can elevate the role of UX to be a role like that, then you can get a really strong yin and yang created between the role of product management and the role of UX. So as promised, I will jump out of the presentation real quick. And I've got two presentations that I have shared. Well, one of these, this is how we actually have the organizational structure at GoCanvas right now. So you can see that we have side-by-side relationship between product managers and user experience. And one of the things that you still need to figure out is sort of like what the relationship is between individuals and product managers, or whether it's sort of like a group effort, kind of like working with a group of product managers. But you can see the significance of what the UX group looks like within this organization. Right? It's sort of like an indication of the level that we think that UX needs to play within the org. A couple things, testing and things like that. But there's a lot of research that's not necessarily project-based. Right? We're kind of getting into this as well. It's like upstream. Like, let's just understand who our customer is in the first place. Let's understand what makes them tick, what makes them think, who they are, how they find us, what their concerns are, what their, you know, let's really get that empathy, and let's distribute that across all the rest of the team. Right? So that's kind of like part one to this. I think of kind of recognizing what the role of user experience is, and how it can be sort of like done best for the reasons we kind of look for. I'm going to try to go fast through these just because there's a lot of specific things that I want to share with you. This is a presentation that I gave to GoCanvas when I started a few months back. You can see my index and stuff in here. But it just sort of like, we basically did a presentation about what it meant for us to convert ourselves from being a sales-oriented company to being a product-first company. Okay? When I say product-first, I don't mean like customer-second. I mean, product-first means customer-centric as well. That's how you go about doing it. I think those two are kind of like the same kind of thing. But we have to kind of understand what it means at that company to be driving things from a customer-centric point of view. And one of these things is that I want to focus on here is, this is the presentation I give in all hands. Every single person in the company, I don't care what role they were in, it was important for them to be able to see this. Which is this note that it requires discipline to kind of keep the product simple. And the example that I always use for our product, and I think it applies to a lot of them out there, is to explain kind of like the notion of like the Swiss Army knife, right? It's a great product. It can do all kinds of cool things. You go camping, but if you think about why you use it, why you like it, it's like it's functional, yes, but it's also safe. It also fits in your pocket. It's also something that doesn't take up a lot of space. And something like, there's a million other kind of elements of what makes a Swiss Army knife successful. But of course, I give any one of you a Swiss Army knife, you go camping with it, and I guarantee each one of you is going to come back with some specific thing that you wish the Swiss Army knife did in addition to what I gave it to do, right? And you're like, well, I wish it had a saw, or I wish it had a compass, or I wish that it had a, wine opener. That's probably what I would say. So, great to get the feedback. But if you just keep doing that over and over and over, which is a lot of times what product management will end up doing, is it turns into this, right? Certainly what sales will ask us for, right? Is these kinds of things. But what happens is each incremental one, you think it's an improvement, but it's actually taking a step backwards in terms of what the product is actually about. Suddenly, this thing doesn't fit in your pocket. Now it weighs 5 pounds and it pulls your pants down when you put it in there, right? Or you can't even cut a peach with it anymore because your hand can't even actually grip around it. And it's easy to spot this kind of thing when it comes to physical products. But it's not so easy to spot it when it happens in software, right? And so we see this kind of thing happen all the time, where you add this, you add that, and now suddenly the first-time user experience has been sort of decimated, right? Because they're seeing this, they're like, I don't even know where to start, right? But if you actually gave them this, it's a better product for the user than this. Even if something had said, I was using this and I wanted all these additional things to it, right? So it's important, and this is the role that UX plays with making the product as good as it can be. It's not just a matter of what's the next feature that we should add. It's a matter of setting what the design principles are for the company, for the product, and making sure that we adhere to those design principles, right? So products can say, here's the product metrics that we're trying to hit, but UX has to have an equal voice to say, these are the product design principles that we need to make sure that we adhere to. And if they can both be established simultaneously, right, and they're both kind of like grounded in research and real discipline behind them, then together they can ensure that the product goes in the right direction rather than the wrong direction, as might be driven by customers or sales folks or stuff like that. There's a question about that. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, so this is going to relate just to in case people could hear because they're facing the other way. The point that he was making is that the question is, what are you selling? Right? Are you selling a Swiss Army knife that has all these features? Are you selling a packet of features, or are you selling an idea? Right, the idea of being able to kind of like go camping and being prepared while you're there. And I think that's right. Right. So this comes back to then the relationship that UX can have with marketing. Right? To define what the marketing message is and the story that you're trying to tell about what the value proposition of your product is. Focus your attention on that rather than focusing your attention on this. So those are just a couple quick examples that I wanted to share with that. And I'll go right back. All right, the next one. All right, number 2. Allow UX to span across different functions, and that's actually what we're saying here. Which means that it's important that UX has its own interfaces with other disciplines within the company. So one of the things that I think is very important about a good PM and UX partnership is that PM doesn't try to sort of consume all the relationships with everybody else. And with that, in a lot of companies, what you see is product managers with this like a hub and spoke model, right? Where product management has 60% because they interact with everybody. They're interacting with engineering, they're interacting with marketing and sales and support and ops, and the list goes on. But then UX is only attached to product. And the reality is UX, to be able to do those things that we just talked about, needs to be connected to everybody else. Because if you're drawing out, for example, a customer journey map, you want that journey map to cover the entire customer journey, right? Which is the moment that they identify that they have a problem that they need to go solve, to the moment that they discover you, to the moment that they sort of like try your product, right? And this kind of goes on. But what that means is, it's not just about the internal product process. It's about the process that the customer goes through from the very first moment, which might include the marketing funnel, right? The kind of pages and things like that that marketing does. So that means that it's important that UX has a direct interaction with those folks as well. So I was going to show you a couple examples of how that comes to life. Sorry to keep jumping back and forth. All right. Number two thing that I wanted to show is a customer journey that we've created. So this is something that was created by the UX team here. And we map this out in such a way that we can clarify for the rest of the company what the customer journey actually looks like. From the trigger of sort of like what makes them take action. So the nature of our product is we basically have a platform that allows small businesses to build their own app on a mobile device that they then deploy to their employee base, and they get to customize all the attributes of what that app experience actually is. And so there's a trigger that businesses run into, and they're like piled up with paperwork, etc. What does it actually look like? Let's map this out, right? And what you see is that this is not strictly the UX, the product experience, right? It probably is from here down, but up here is actually more of a marketing experience. And so by connecting those things, we kind of enforce that the UX and marketing is kind of like speaking together. The second thing that I thought I would share with you is, believe it or not, my calendar. This is my calendar. I go to meetings so that other people don't have to. Okay? Everything that's in blue is not this, and everything that is in orange is this stuff. These are examples of actual meetings that we do on a regular basis that are meetings that are about, that include UX playing a role in the meeting, and somebody outside of product also being in that same meeting, where they're working together on something. So just earlier today, we did a workshop called Kill the Company. We tried to create a fake company that was going to dominate and sort of like strip away all the business from GoCanvas. What would that company look like? How would we design it? How would we make it successful? And then we think about how do we block against them, right? But that's in this thing that's not just a marketing exercise. It's not just a product exercise. UX is there and present in that meeting as well, right? Product team meeting on a regular basis, weekly. We have usability, things. You can see that there's 13 guests for a user study, right? The reason for that is because we have engineers who have been asked to kind of like show up to these as well. So the engineers, we can have those kinds of conversations and understand why we're building things the way that we are, because they've seen it firsthand from our customers trying to use our product, right? Or big offsites that we have, thinking about what the process looks like for updating the homepage. Also a combination between marketing and UX. So you sort of see a lot of these same kinds of things emerging, but this is real life, right? Next, commandment number 3. All right, slideshows. Sorry about this. Whoops. Give space for strategic design. It's important that we create budget, that we create time, that we create the things that we need, so that user experience, and especially research, doesn't get relegated to being post a decision being made about what product we're going to go build next, right? Because that's so constraining. It's like, we've decided we're going to go tackle this problem. Forget about everything else. Now we need you to make sure that this particular thing is easy to use, right? It's almost like, the emperor over there, talking about, I want this particular project to be successful. It's nice that you want the project to be successful, but it's so much easier to make it successful when you know what the overarching strategy is for UX, across the board, right? So if you actually have the kind of like powertrain of personas, to mental models, to design principles, to customer journey, to information architecture, to style guide, to pattern library, right? If you have those kinds of things mapped out up front, and you've done the homework ahead of time, then you don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel, or have a different interpretation of those things depending on which designer in the organization is working on this project versus that project. And so that's an important thing to do as well. So I will show you live examples of this. All right, so budget. This is an actual budget request that we have that we're using at the end of this year. You can see that there's dollar amounts for lots of things, but especially with research, right? These are all things that I can say in 2018 about what we'll do for the year of 2019 in terms of like the costs that I want to ask the organization to incur now so that we're prepared to be successful down the road. And that means that if I can define that stuff now, I don't know what projects we're going to be working on a year from now, but I do know what research we need to do now to be able to make good decisions tomorrow about what it is that we're going to work on. So that's another real and then an example of one of the things that comes out of that is our style guide. So this is something that's very public facing. You know, we get into all kinds of things, what illustrations need to look like, what buttons should look like, etc., what kinds of things to do, what kinds of things not to do. And this has been available not just within the product team, but outside the product team as well. Right? So again, sort of like real life examples. In the illustration, you can see that too. But okay. So those are real life examples on that. Set a customer-centric vision. So I'm a big fan of product visions, product strategies. And some people might say, wait, Ben, that's like counter-to-agile. And I call bullshit on it. It's not counter-to-agile. Right? It is not anti-agile to know the general direction you want to go. It is anti-agile to say, I know exactly what projects we're going to do, and here's the sequence, and here's the dates, and nothing's going to be changed. That's, yeah, don't do that, right? But to me, it's kind of like the same as, like you're taking a road trip. Like I just did a big road trip about 2 years ago in the summer with my family, did the whole Chevy Chase vacation whole trip. It was nuts. And we drove all the way across the country, and we ended up in California. And along the way, we had certain things that we wanted to see. But then, of course, we ran into traffic in places. We go through St. Louis, and like, oh my God, the traffic's terrible. So how do we get through that, right? It's not that I said I have to use Waze for every aspect of my trip, right? I can still have a general plan. I can use Google Maps to say, first I want to go, by the way, where do I want to be? Actually, I want to end up in LA. Okay, that's good to know. So set your destination, right? Then I sort of think of, like, that's like product vision. Where do I want to be? I sort of imagine myself doing that. Now, part 2 is how am I going to get there overall? And it's okay that it doesn't get followed exactly. I don't need to know the exact dates and times and places that I'm going to be everywhere, but I would like to know, am I taking Highway 40 across or am I taking Highway 80 across? I'm going to see very different things if I take one path versus another. Which one do I want to do? How much time do I actually have to go across the country, right? Do I have specific places and things like that that I need to be along the way? Certain pit stops that need to happen. And if you have a sense of that kind of stuff, it helps you plot a general course. But then as you actually do your driving through different cities, you very well may use Waze and say, actually, I'm here at 5 p.m., not a great time to be on the freeways, let me find a better way around. All those are fine. They all kind of like work together, right? So that's how you can be both agile at the same time you can sort of like set a course and a vision for what you do. Where I see companies fall down on this, even when they try to do this and try to get it right, is they set a vision that is company-centric instead of customer-centric. I've seen tons of vision documents out there that say things like, we are going to make $100 million next year doing the following things. Our metrics will look like this. Our customer type will look like this. Our average revenue per account will look like that. I'm like, that's great. Why don't you just say it's $1 billion? Like, I don't know, just make up your numbers, right? And the way you need to actually get it right is you start with the customer, and then you back into what the numbers are actually going to be and make sure that it actually makes sense from that standpoint. So what's the customer's experience that you're going to create? And once you define what that customer's experience is going to be, then you're in a position to say, by achieving that, how will we then achieve the numbers that we actually want to achieve? And if you're not able to tie those two things together in that order, you already have a broken vision, right? If you can't actually tie it back to what the customer's experience is going to be, your vision is probably set up to be a failure anyway. So you've got to be able to get there. So what I thought I would do is I would share some specific actual vision documents that are being used. This is a company that I have advised. They make a mobile app for meditation. It's called 10% Happier. And it's a really great company. It's a really good product. You can see the commentary. It goes back and forth. This is a real live actual business document that they give you permission to share. And what they've done here is they've defined, you can see embedded that the core of this document is not, we're going to make this amount of money. It's not, we're going to go achieve, what percent market share. It's, what are the aha moments for a customer? What is the points where they sort of like, what do these important loops look like, right? And it's that I'm inspired and motivated to start meditating in the first place. Wait, I can actually do this, and I like it, right? I kind of felt like maybe this wasn't for me. And they want to nail that. I can see how it fits into my life. I'm seeing or feeling results that I actually care about along the way, and then, oh shit, this is more, about more than just what I thought I wanted, right? This is actually something that's going to really kind of like change me and change my identity about myself. And each one of these kind of like happens in a stepwise manner. But having listed this out, by having plotted it out, by having done the upfront user research, they can then set a vision that is customer-centric, and then they can talk about what the numbers are that can get behind the scenes. What kind of target customer are we going after? What do they look like in terms of persona, and so on. I'm not going to share too much of this document because I promised I would not. I will share more of the GoCanvas one. So we also have that. So the product vision document that I've been working on for a while since I got here. We have other versions of this, and then you saw the cartoon kind of like format that I shared earlier. But again, the core of the product, the fundamental piece of what's the actual customer journey look like. And I wrote this as though it was like a journal entry from a real customer. On this day, I do this. And then my next journal entry looks like this. Right? And here's what Sally did next. And here's the rest of it. And it goes on and on. Right? Now, it's not detailed about the specific user interactions that you have. It's not Sally click the radio button and it wasn't a drop down and here's how it all, the whole thing worked. It's here's the emotion that Sally was looking for. Here's what actually kind of like overall made her feel like she could move on to the next stage. Here's what the next stage was from her perspective. Right? Those are kind of like the vision documents that I talked about. Okay. So those are those examples. Next. Number 5. Moving along. All right, measuring UX achievement. This is a really important one, I think, as well. At the end of the day, we want UX to be in a position to drive the roadmap decisions that are being made by product just as much. If their job is to fill the empty chair, and we think that the customer should have a voice, who's providing that voice? It's the UX team. And if the UX team is the one who's actually providing that voice, we need to make sure that it's as loud as everybody else's voice within the company. Otherwise, it's going to get shut down, right? And what speaks really loud within companies is numbers. Hard, actual, quantitative outcomes that have real business impact, right? And so it's important to establish success metrics for UX as well, because if you can do that, just like marketing said, I want this many marketing qualified leads or this many visitors for the site, and I'm getting my help, my feet held to the fire on this, and I have product dependencies for that for the roadmap. So hey, product manager, I need you to go prioritize these things. Well, the CEO, when of course, you're going to have a million different requests from different stakeholders. And it's going to be way more than engineering has the ability to do, and then product is going to have to make some tough calls. And a lot of times what actually happens is not necessarily product manager's fault, but they get put into a situation where I've got quantitative real numbers of impact that I'm going to have by prioritizing this stuff, and I've got kind of fuzzy, hand-wavy, I hope that users like it, kind of, delight and stuff like that over here. Well, guess which one wins, right? So how do we make it so that we tip the balance the other way and tip the scales? And that's by setting success metrics for the UX group. The success metrics for the UX group can be all kinds of interesting things. And people think about NPS and stuff like that. I think those are okay to use. I thought I would share with you what we are using in GoCanvas. And this is something that my team who's here doesn't know yet, but they're going to find out right now. Which is very shortly we're going to be taking this number, which we call PQL, which is product qualified leads, which means they've gone through that aha moment that we've defined. So the UX team figured out that the key elements of success for a customer in the early stage is that they have that they go through the loop of signing up for our product, customizing an app for themselves, deploying that app to themselves actually, filling out the app that they created, and seeing the submission come out on the other end over like an email, getting a PDF. Okay, that's the key. Once they see that, they're like, oh, I get what GoCanvas does. Cool. So wait, I can customize this further, and then it would ask me different kinds of questions as I'm filling it out. Great. That's exactly, okay, I'm good now. Now I know what I'm going to do. So we've seen that time and time with like user research to identify that's the thing. So why don't we measure it then? So the UX team is not just responsible, for driving, things like customer satisfaction and people kind of getting through the flow. They are responsible for driving PQS. So that means that people went through that whole kind of end-to-end process. And so we think about the first-time UX and things that impact the bottom line. So that's what elevates UX into a role that has equal weight with everybody else. So it's important to think about for your own company, what could you do to establish those same kinds of metrics for you based on the nature of your business? I think it's an important thing to get there. Next one, number 6. start roadmap updates with UX. Okay, great. So it's quarterly roadmap update time. We're going to have our 1-year roadmap. We're going to tweak it all around, and every quarter we're going to share it with the rest of the business. Product management's responsible for the roadmap updates, but usually what happens is we talk to marketing, we talk to sales, we talk to engineering, what can you do, etc. And they put it forward, and then hey, UX guys, so here's what we're going to go work on. Make it pretty easy to use, right? Not so good, right? So we actually want to start this whole process with UX. If they're actually the ones doing the user research up front, and they're learning without individual projects in mind about what makes customers tick and what's going to make them successful, and we've tied those together with real business metrics, it's empowering to then UX to say, hey, as product manager, you guys tell me where the roadmap should go. And I'll show you a specific example of how we pulled that off, and I'll actually pull some from Opower. So save. You're supposed to leave all the documents there. Don't tell anybody. All right. So what I'll share with you is this presentation that we had. And this presentation is called The State of the Union with the UX Union. We didn't know how to pronounce it, so we called it the State of the Onion. This is kind of like a funny little thing. So the State of the Onion presentation was a quarterly presentation from the user research team or the user experience team to product management, whole group, and said, hey guys, at the end of the day, after going through everything else, here's the part that matters. These are our design principles. We've agreed on what those design principles are. It's like the Swiss Army knife, right? Here's what makes our Swiss Army knife successful, given that it's a piece of software. It needs to be motivating. It needs to be actionable. It needs to be credible, right? How are we actually performing against these? And they would measure this based on having ongoing user research where customers are coming in, they're pushing people off the street or whatever, to see what their impressions of our product were, to see where they fell over, where they didn't, etc. As well as, honestly, some qualitative assessments. But even if it was qualitative, all we had to do was put it in the color code over here, and it started to mean something, right? It's like in a chart, so it must matter. So they put it in a chart for us, and they said, okay, these are the areas that we need to focus on. And this was the case. This was a presentation from Q3 2012. This is how we were doing 6 months earlier in Q1 of 2012. And this is how we're doing now. You can see we made the improvements that we were looking for. That's great. Thank you, product management, for having prioritized the things that you needed to. And last time, what that presentation looked like to you was something like this. And here's what it looks like this quarter for the next things that we need to do, right? So we talked about it being actionable, engaging, empowering. These are the kinds of investments that we see on the roadmap right now. And you see on over here, this is the legend, right? So things that are already on the roadmap are the things in dark blue. Things that are not yet on the roadmap are in light blue. In other words, I'm telling you what needs to go on the roadmap. These things that are in light blue, please put these ones on there because they're going to help us to achieve our directive, which is to drive, these design principles in a better place, right? So that's really empowering for the UX team. It's something I had an amazing VP of UX who did an amazing job of pulling this together. But she would say, these are the things that you need to keep. The check marks. Do not drop those off the roadmap. I know you guys have a lot of pressures from other groups. These are the ones that we are dependent on. These are the ones that we can probably kind of get rid of. These are the ones that need to be added. And if they're not added, we're going to be screwed. We're not going to make the progress that you want us to make. So that's the mapping between UX needs and what the roadmaps need. So that's one example. Moving along with number 7. Okay. Centralizing user research. Stephanie, who's part of NoVA UX, is hired that we. How long have you been here now? 2 months. All right. So you've been here for 2 months, and she's done an amazing job of really doing this, which is pulling together our user research needs that both span across product management and UX. Right? So it's not just sort of what I see a lot of teams doing is they've got a user research function. Okay, kudos. You're already 90% of the way there. But then with that, it's like the UX team actually drives the user research that gets done. But if you can have it where both product management and user research are flowing together into one single string of kind of here's the backlog of the research projects that we're going to do, then it actually forces a really big conversation. So there's a weekly meeting that I have with Stephanie and with Sangran, who is our prototyper, and we work together to kind of go through what those priorities look like. Because every product manager is going to say, well, my stuff's most important. I need the answers to these things. Right? And every UX designer is going to say, here's the things that I actually need. Let's actually sort that out. What do we really need to know next? What do we not need to know next? And it forces great conversations around the priority. but not looking at it through the lens of just UX or just product management, but looking at it kind of collectively between the two. So that's been very important. And I'll show you what that looks like for us. So we use a Trello board, and it actually combines all these things, right? So there's Stephanie, there's all the people who are on it. You see what the backlog looks like for our mobile product management team, web product management, the lifetime value of customers, so like another group within product that we have. Here are the kinds of questions that we think are really important to be answered. There's sort of research work that needs to be done. And then here's what we have from UX. Now all of these things are replicated. Whoops. All these things are replicated over here. And so this is a single queue that includes everything. And this is the one that we actually prioritize on a regular basis. And everybody within the group knows what those priorities look like, and we review that back with the rest of the team as well. So they're like very much kind of like so that's that one. And then the last couple that we have, number 8. I see a lot of companies that do the work to try to understand their users better, to understand what's going on in their heads, to understand what their expectations are, to understand the way, the nomenclature that they use, the perspective that they come into when they're trying to use a product. Like for ours, it's really interesting because the companies who use our product are the ones who are kind of buried in some sort of like a paper process. You need to go build a new form. And they think of it as a form that's really an app that they're creating within a mobile experience. Well, what is it? Are they trying to create their own custom mobile app? Or are they trying to replace a piece of paper? Because if you're trying to replace a piece of paper, maybe the best design way of doing that would be, well, why don't you recreate your form in a digital kind of like context, and then we'll create an app that then goes and fills out all the little elements of your form. But we might have a completely different mental model, which is, no, I was here to kind of like create an app, or the CEO told me that we've got to go through this digitization initiative. Show me how you can help me with that. Right? So completely different frameworks for how to think about this stuff. The important part is not that we just did the work. I see a lot of companies who do that work to figure that stuff out, and then it just sits there as this like academic exercise where you understand who your users are, but I don't see that data, that information that you gain, actually flowing all the way to real decisions that are getting made on a day-to-day basis within the product team. So the question is, how do you go about doing that? And I think there's a few ways that you can do that. One of them is actually making good personas. There's a huge debate raging these days, if you haven't noticed, right, within the UX community of whether personas are good, bad, stupid, smart, whatever, right? I think it's kind of like everything else. Bad personas suck, and good personas are actually good. So what makes a good persona good? Here's some design principles and some personas that we'll kind of like walk through here. What happened to it? It's gone. I'll have to find it a little bit later. But I'll show you in the form of design principles. So at Opower, the product was trying to help people to save energy. It was a product that was sold to utilities, but then it was actually a consumer-facing product where you literally would just check your mailbox. And I don't mean your inbox, I mean your mailbox, right? Pull out an envelope, open it up, it's from your utility, and it says, you're using a lot of energy compared to your neighbors. What can you do to kind of like, save energy? And it turns out that utilities have all kinds of wacky incentives to try to actually drive down your energy use. But there were things that needed to be defined around those principles that were very closely related to the mental models that were out there. So, one of the things was assuming people don't care. By designing these as product principles, that's what then led to the state of the onion presentation, which then led to the definition of where are we actually, how are we actually doing, and real metrics behind that, which then drove roadmap decisions. So that's a way that these kinds of things can be pulled together. The personas that were defined for Opower as well were also really good. Okay, so these are persona definitions that we were using at Opower. We have the conflicted green. I'm like totally that guy where I try to pretend like I'm green and I'm horribly wasteful. Earl, who's upset, I'm doing all I can, stop yelling at me with your stupid home energy reports, I'm sick of them, that kind of thing. And so we defined all these things, but the key part of this, and the part that made it really work for us, was understanding their motivations, their knowledge, and what it would take for them to make action. We broke those things down, and you can see that these things are consistent from person to person to person, right? So by doing it that way, we kind of plot different people on the same axes. And by using those axes, we could ask ourselves the question, so we actually go through the roadmap at the end. Here's what we actually propose doing. And we would ask ourselves the question, what would Joyce say about our roadmap? Is it helping her? Does Joyce look for a Swiss Army knife that's thin and looks like this, and we're just adding more crap to it? Or is Joyce looking for something that's going to be bigger, more configurable? What is the kind of stuff that we could do that's going to make her happy? And we would look across the 6 percenters that we had defined, and then we would say, who's winning and who's losing with this roadmap? Is that actually what we want to have happen? And because we had mapped out those mental models and embedded them in personas in an actionable manner like that, we could afford ourselves to ask that kind of question and come to those kinds of conclusions. And that led to better decisions that we made. And sometimes we look at a roadmap and say, oh my God, Joyce is exactly the kind of person we're trying to design for. And she's going to look at a roadmap and be like, what the hell is this? Right? Like, how would she interpret it? So it's a good kind of question for you to consider asking yourself as well. And then there's another example. So GoCanvas case study. I took the same cartoon format that I showed you earlier, the one that kind of looked like this, and rewrote it, right, as this set of bullets, where we kind of walk into the depth of what customers are thinking about at the point of the trigger, or the point of discovery of the product, etc. And then, with the very hard and painful process of taking a highlighter to that, and calling out all the places where, if we're honest with ourselves, we're like, oh, our product kind of sucks. Go change that. Or, we're making a big assumption here. I'm not sure if that's actually true. Okay, well, if you're making an assumption and you're not sure it's true, that's your next research project. Right? It's acting. Right? You can actually do something like this. We could establish design principles on this. Maybe we should have a single call to action in place because it's such an important part of the narrative. When we really condense this into like a one-pager, the important part of the narrative is that users never get confused about what to do next, and that they get to the wow moment within 1 hour and feel like it. And if we're honest with ourselves, we have too much functionality within the first-time user experience of our app builder application. We need to remove functionality, not be adding to it. And if that's the direction we're going to go, then I can say no and justify that decision when all the other folks within the company are saying, hey, add this feature, add this feature, add this feature. And it sort of empowers you to go do that, right? So those kinds of things are really helpful. Again, it's ways of taking mental models, capturing them here, and then being realistic with those about driving real decisions you can make within the company. So that's number 8. Almost 3. Why do you have to keep all right. Prioritizing customer delight. I love this. So this is really important as well. And I don't know. Raise your hand if you work in like B2B versus B2C, or more B2B business. Who's in B2C business? So like, yeah, so a little bit half-half. Maybe a few more people in B2B. What I see is this mistake being made a lot within a lot of companies. I should have probably put this as like one of the arch nemesis, like saying, don't prioritize delight. But it's like, avoid constraining the work that you do to merely functionality and usability. I do see companies taking good first strategies to say it's not just about functionality, it's also about the usability. But I don't see them taking the next step to say it's not just about the usability, it's also about the delight that you can provide. You see that in the B2C space a lot. So many companies have come to have an awareness that that's really important. And in B2B, guess what? Your end users are people too, and it's also really important that they find delight in this. There's a nice model that I've found that I think is really helpful with this. I don't know if you guys have used this before. It's called the Kino model. And it's pretty good. You basically break down all of your users' expectations and desires for your product and bucket them into 3 categories. Right? You can kind of, forgetting about our product for a sec, I saw a good example of this, like for Uber. Like, what is the actual Kino model for Uber? There's 3 kinds: must-haves, performance characteristics, and then delighters. And for Uber, at the time at least that it went live, right, because these things change over time, the must-have is I got to be able to get from point A to point B. Another must-have is I'm not going to wait more than like 5 minutes for my run. It's just the way it is. Otherwise, I'm going to go find taxi. I got to get where I'm going because some reason I don't have time. Performance characteristics are things where you kind of look at them in total, and you sort of say, like a must-have is saying, if you don't do this, I'm not even considering using your product. Right? You have to do them all. If you don't do them all, done. I'm out. Right? So it's got to be, in this case, it had to be cheaper than a limo. It didn't actually have to be cheaper at the beginning than a taxi, like Uber Black or whatever, right? It would be cheaper than a limo and nicer than a taxi. Those were both important. So they can kind of like define that in terms of must-haves. Performance characteristics are things like, well, how fast do you actually get there? Right? Is it this kind of speed or is that kind of speed? Performance characteristics would be like, what's the cost? Right? Is it actually like a good deal or is it not? How nice is the car? How nice is the driver? Right? So what they were trying to do is to say the package of, and this is an important part versus the differentiators, the package of things that we're going to deliver is better than the package of things from a customer's point of view, not from ours, right? And therefore, we have a good sort of like a differentiator. If you think about buying a car, differentiators are things like, well, how does it handle? What's the pickup look like? What's the cost look like? What's the safety rating? And you kind of put all these things together and you say, this car seems like a good deal, this car seems like a bad deal, right? Then you get into the delighters. Now, way back in the day, delighters, when you were buying an automobile, would be stuff like the fact that it actually had power steering. Like, I actually remember the days when the car literally didn't have power steering. Or that it had cruise control. Then it went into things like the windows, right? Where you could just push a button and the window would go down and never come in. Maybe I'm older than some of you people here. So, you got to use a crank, right? And now it's things like music, stuff. Like, does it actually have streaming music service built in? Can I, use it with my phone? Right? Those are the kinds of things that become, like, really important. They're delighters that separate the car from all the other cars that you bought. It's the kind of stuff that customers, after buying the car, that they talk about with their friends. That somebody else sits in the car and they say, oh, damn, that's awesome. I want that. That sounds great, right? This is the kind of stuff that makes a company's product go viral. This is the kind of stuff that drives word-of-mouth marketing. And they're very critical for driving business success. This is not just random fluff that's kind of like layered on top. If you don't care about actually getting pay value or viral growth, or you don't care about NPS scores, then go ahead and ignore your delighters. So I'll bet that most of you guys do. It's a matter of connecting the dots between what those delighters actually are and what the business drivers are that you're trying to make happen. And a lot of companies ignore this, especially in the B2B space, which is unfortunate, but good, especially. So those are those things for the ninth one. And then finally, number 10, pushing each other to be bold. This is just a matter of which is it's okay to make mistakes. When product managers call out designers, your design sucks, I'm not going to release this thing, I don't approve of it, right? Those are the kinds of things that hold people back from making really interesting kind of design choices. For designers, the same kind of thing as well, right? For us, some of the work has been done. Challenge them, challenge some of the assertions that they're making, right? Don't just take things status quo. Well, we've always designed features this way, and we always use drop-downs in these situations. Well, maybe we shouldn't this time, right? Maybe we should experiment. Again, you're always going to be following if you're not the one who's leading. If you're not experimenting, you're not going to be leading. So it's an important part of the process. It's an important part of the culture that sort of like trust is established as well. I don't have a specific example that I can share with that. If you want a specific example, come join us again. All right, and with that, yes, I'm shameless. Yes, we're hiring. In UX, we're trying to hire 2 senior designers. A lot of fun to be here. We're going to be growing like crazy. We actually have some big announcements coming up soon that will definitely put our name very much on the radar with a lot of folks. So it's going to be some really fun times. It's one of the reasons I was excited to go here. And different people in my team are floating around tonight. If you haven't had a chance to talk to them, raise your hands. So I've got a lot of people in the back. They're up there. Stephanie's over here. We've got Yvonne. So some great folks on the team. If you get a chance, like while you're mingling around, hang out, talk to them. And then also the advisory type stuff, if you're like, I'm inspired by some of the stuff, I don't want to join jokers and say I'll do this kind of stuff with my own company, great, just talk to me. I'm always up for doing this. It doesn't just have to be tonight. Reach out, find me on LinkedIn. I've got a bunch of business cards back there. Do whatever you want to do, but let's connect. Like, I love connecting with people. I love talking shop. That's how I learn is by having these conversations, and I really appreciate the opportunities to do that for sure. So that's the end of my slides. I know it's a little bit longer than I had hoped. I'll take a long time to flip back and forth, but I can do a quick Q&A if folks have questions related to this. Yeah. Yeah. How would you? I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, so what's the alternative to designing by committee? Hopefully anything, if you've been there and doing that. I think that here's the way that I think about it, right? So if you have a bunch of different silos where everybody's kind of not talking to one another, then you have a lot of approvals that you need to go through, right? Because nobody can speak for anybody else. The reality is the design of your product does have a lot of impacts on different things. It might have legal implications. It might have It might have metrics implications or marketing implications. That's good that it has all those implications. It means you're probably working on something that's really meaningful, right? But the problem is, what that means is then all these people are like, well, I've got to be in the room for the design exercise. And I think the important thing to do to break away from them feeling like they need to be there is to feel in the first place like you already understand what they're trying to achieve. And therefore, they trust you to be able to do it, right? So if the marketing person knows that the UX team member who's actually working on something is familiar with the brand message, knows what we're trying to communicate, knows what we're trying to stay away from, knows who we're trying to differentiate from, then that person is in a position to be able to make their own good decisions. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't see it before it goes to engineering. Maybe that's still a helpful thing to do, but not as an approval process, as an important kind of piece of the puzzle for the designer's sake, to make sure that they haven't left anything off, right? And it's to further build on top of that trust. So the more you can invest in that trust, the more it pays dividends, down the road. Unfortunately, it's a thing that's really hard to change overnight, right? You can't really change it overnight. But I think what you can do as a one specific action item is to go meet with the people who are currently in those committees and say, I want to understand better what it is that you're trying to achieve overall, and that will empower me to then do a better job of doing that for you in the first place without you having to feel like you have to be part of the design process yourself. Ooh. That's a great question. Example of a red herring UX metric that's problematic. Yeah, that's probably the one that was going to come to mind, was really NPS, I think. So there are actually some other ones. What are the ones that we've been talking about with Michael? Yeah, WAMI, W-A-M-I, or W-O-M-I? W-O-M-I.
It's very popular in Silicon Valley.
Right. It is a little bit of so W-O-M-I, it's called WAMI, and I can't remember the specific nuances of how that works, but if you look it up, it's getting pretty popular in Silicon Valley. And that's a reasonable alternative. It still covers sort of like. No, I'm sorry, that it's recommended. So we have a user researcher who's an advisor to our company who has been there and done that with a gazillion other companies. He was like the head of research at Honda and stuff like that. And he had pointed us more in that direction for our product. And he says for some products, NPS is reasonable, but it's overused very frequently. And WAMI is a more appropriate metric for a lot of companies, especially in the B2B space. Because you asked that question, NPS, would you recommend it to your friends or family members? I'm like, it's a B2B software. No, they're not in the same business that I'm in, right? And it means crap. So yeah, time spent on site. Yeah, so it's like if you're like a football fan, it's like time of possession. Like, who cares? If you're not scoring while you have the ball, it doesn't matter who had the ball, right? And the same kind of thing is true, I think, with like time on site, which is like as a measure of engagement. For measures of engagement, I like specific actions that people take, and specifically choosing actions that deliver a better experience to them over time. If they're either to them or to others, that's the kind of better engagement metric that I've seen over the time. Other question? Yeah.
It's a good space to do the design. What's the team? What's your boundary as far as time and rollback?
Sure. So the question was, talking about strategic design work. What's an example maybe where it goes too far, where it's too strategic, right?
What's the boundary?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, it's hard for me to give a pinpoint specific answer. To me, it's more about how you do some of the things that we discussed. For example, and this is probably the reason that a lot of people are hating on personas, is like, well, I'm a soccer mom, and I went to school at this university, and I graduated in this. Like, who cares? Like, the part that actually matters about it is what's driving me to make the decisions. Where does my emotional connection to the product actually come from specifically? What are the constraints that I'm actually going to run into? And so that might be an example with personas of like, you can get very kind of like hand-wavy kind of like stuff that actually is just kind of like fluff, and it doesn't really add anything to the decision-making process that happens in the business. And I think that if UX can better understand some of the business metrics that are trying to be moved and ask themselves the question as they're doing the work, hey, how does this actually correspond to moving those metrics forward? And if you can't answer that question, you're probably getting too like. Yeah, I mean, or decision making processes, right? Which is like we have a call that we make on these kinds of things, and here's how we make those decisions. I want to make sure that user research and things like that actually fit directly into those decisions. If you can't pinpoint the decision that is going to be driven by the research that you're doing, then why are you doing it? Right? I see a lot of that kind of thing happening from time to time. So, and it's not like a pinpoint answer of a specific like deliverable, but I think it's more about how the work gets done. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Why don't we do like two more? Yeah.
Thanks for the talk. So I have a question related to how do you decide to, I don't know, trying to think of it, but we've seen the video how did you run and how do you
Sure. Yeah. So the question, you make sure that I understand the question, which is you're relatively new in UX, 6 months, or you're relatively new to the company. The company. Okay, got it. Right. Working, what's the thing you can do as a UXer working with product management to kind of build that better relationship? So I do think that learning, so number one thing I would say would be take the time to ask the product manager to walk you through how the roadmap gets constructed. What decisions go into that? What are the unknowns that you wish you knew? What are the kinds of things that are assumptions that you're making that you wish you had better kind of data to back up? What are the things that some things are you're not going to be able to make develop, and you're not going to be able to validate. They're just calls you have to kind of go with. Which things are which? Which business metrics are most important for us to move? How will you measure the success of this project after the fact? Or how will people think about this in 2 years' time? Right? Not just right off the bat, but in like 2 years' time, looking back at this feature, what would make somebody say, "Wow, that was a really important change that we made to our product"? So I think number one is if you can kind of immerse yourself in kind of like the mental model of the product, right? Like how do you kind of think about this? And it allows you to kind of work with them, think about things with them, and think in using the same kind of terminology and language and stuff like that, which is helpful. I'd say the second one is to one of the things that I found to be really valuable is to walk through similarly your own thinking in the earlier stages of design. I think a lot of times product managers see things quite late in the process from designers, right? So they're like, hey, I've thought about the design of this, and here's the thing that I think we should do. It's like, the reality is the process actually had a lot more sophistication to it, right? You probably had some sort of like divergent thinking that then led to convergent thinking, and you're kind of like skipping all these steps. And I'd say as a product manager, kind of coming from more that lens myself, that I would say I like to see the sausage being made a little bit, right? Not all the details, and then you're walking through every single thing, but I think to start and say, hey, here's a design that I've come up with that I think is a really good one. But there were 3 different variations that I came up with. And the reason I was thinking of those 3 and not something else was because of this reason. Because that's where they whoa, hold on. Wait, why did you think that those weren't good solutions? Like, hold on, that's exactly where we want to go, right? And so it's helpful to kind of like be able to walk through your own design process, I think, with a product manager and pull the product manager. So those are 2 things I think you should be able to do. Sure. One more question? Yeah.
Sorry, hold on. We recently went through a huge website redesign, and one of our higher-ups presented properly, so we realized that that thing that she used to reference on her PowerPoint presentations is no longer on the website for her to show. So she wants it to come back on the website. The research doesn't support that we continue that, and I'm a big advocate about that. But I was just recently told that they're going to ignore the research and they're going to put it back on because so-and-so wants it back on the website. So other than me crying, do you have any advice for how I might stop it before it happens?
Okay, so the question is, A change is made to the website. Somebody doesn't like the change. It's supported by the research though, and now they want to change it back. They're going to change it back. What else do we do?
But then revert the whole website back to where it was.
Right. That's a little bit of a tough one. So home pages and websites are always like, it's like a lightning rod of hatred and criticism and misery for everybody. It's probably a little bit tough. I don't know a good answer to this. Let me throw it out to the group. Who has a good answer for this? Choose another battle. Interesting. Yeah.
GoCanvas is higher.
That's right. Thank you for saying that. I was going to say something. I think that makes sense. But I do really like the idea about that, which is letting them watch it firsthand. There's nothing like, I've been the recipient of a lot of consolidated research. Right? Here's the PowerPoint presentation where I summarize the findings, and I'm like, it's easy to ignore a PowerPoint slide. It's really hard to ignore a real person struggling or being like, where is this thing? I don't know if in the research that we've done that we've recorded the sessions, but if you actually have video clips where somebody like can't find it and be like, what do you want me to kind of tell this user? And a lot of times what happens is, of course, it always seems like a binary decision. Do we include this thing, do we exclude this thing, right? And the reality is there may sometimes be some middle ground where if they say, okay, well, if the user's struggling with it the way they did, maybe we don't revert back to that. But then we can do something else that's a third solution still, that is neither going back to the way it was, nor, leaving it like this, because it doesn't achieve the goal that I have. I mean, it does come back to, the reality is you're going to have business objectives and user objectives. You want to do everything you can to merge those things together. If there's one thesis, I'd say, to the whole talk, it's probably about that. But they are different things for different reasons. Sometimes they don't have show match, and that's one of the reasons that home pages and websites and stuff like that can be really painful. Top naps. Right? And so, maybe walking them through the research will help them to think about alternative solutions that may fit against that. That's the only other thing that but I like a lot of the other ideas that are as well. Including, you're right, I mean, there's also a question of which battles do you pick and which ones do you not. It's not all of them. I think you've got to be selective with which ones and move on. But I can't speak to whether that's important or not. So if you're willing to quiet, that's probably cool. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for coming out and listening to Yabber for like a little while. I'll be hanging around. One other note is people had asked me beforehand whether there was water. Obviously, there would be. I don't know who would drink water instead of beer, but if you are one of those weirdos, we actually do have. There's some cups up on the top shelf over there. And we've got what by the sink there's a tap. It has like a little blue one. It's slow as molasses. It's horrible, but if you just want to use tap water, do that.
And before we get up, can the people that are hiring raise your hand, just so people have another round? Cool, awesome. Thanks for coming out tonight. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.